Unfortunately, we have the concluding side. So Nick is going to show us exactly where you go and how wonderful you're going to be after that.
Thanks, Chris. Right. Thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate that. Thanks for inviting me, Roger, Paddy, Andrew. I feel quite intimidated. I'd rather be in theatre, I think, than facing you lot. But my name's Nick. I'm one of the arthroplasty surgeons, just locally part of the Edinburgh orthopaedic team. A lot of the stuff I'm going to show you today is not just Paddy and I's work, it's a big team behind us. Now, these are my two heroes when I started out in golf in the late 80s. I was a little lad back then. You probably won't even know, well, you probably know who Jack is, but maybe he's not Tom, I don't know. This is 1977, Jewel in the Sun. I bought the book, read about it. It's on YouTube now, and I watch it every year. It's fantastic. Jack finished 11 under, Tom finished 12 under. The third was 1 under. Can't remember his name, will come to me though. Anyway, we all know how good they were, how good a golfers they were. And both of them had hip replacements now. Jack had his in 1999. He said he had 19 grandchildren at that time. His 20th grandchild was on the way. He couldn't even play a ball in the garden with them, let alone get back to golf. He had a hip replacement, which is the most fantastic thing he's ever had. That guy's won 18 major championships. A hip replacement is the most fantastic thing he ever had. Just that. This chap here, Tom Watson, this is in 2009, July. He's leading the Open Championship from start to finish. And then he tied with Stuart Sink, of course, on that last hole, sadly. I wanted him to win so much. He had a hip replacement not even a year beforehand. It was October 2008 he had his hip replacement, and then he nearly won the Open Championship. If it wasn't for that man. I didn't like him, but anyway, I've grew to like Sink a bit better now. But anyway, look at poor Tom on the side. Congratulated him, shook his hand. True gentleman, true gentleman. Anyway. So my conversation's really over there now. Hip replacement, you could nearly win a major championship. Finished. But I thought I would just try and pack it out with a wee bit more stuff. Got it small over there, isn't it? So I thought we'd just go over joint replacement, the brutal joint replacement, and some of the surgery that's involved. I did have some shoulder stuff in here, but just for time, I've kind of cut a lot of it out now. I'm going to go over some of the rehab, some of the return to golf, functional return. Overall benefits to health, health-related quality of life, and also physical function, and some biomechanical work. That there was a Connor Rankin who's done most of this work that I was slightly involved in. There was a poster downstairs about biomechanics of the knee after joint replacement as well. Some current advances in technology, certainly the Mako. I'm sure you've probably seen the Striker stall downstairs with the Mako. That's really leaps and bounds ahead of other providers. And outcome tools that are out there. Well, there's not really anything out there for golfers themselves and whether they are fit for purpose. So hip replacement is pretty brutal. You can see the degenerate joint. We chop it out with a saw. We stick in some metal, and that's about it, really. This is a chap who had a hip replacement. He went and won his club championship the following year after having that hip replacement. We've just done his other side. So we'll see what happens next year. But you can see he's got a very degenerate joint here. We stick in a bit of plastic, cement it in, cement down a big metal rod down the femur. Bob's your uncle. It's pretty simple. With a good outcome. Same operation, been around for 40 years. Quite reliable. Oops, knee replacement's not so reliable. Relies a lot more on the surgeon and surgeon's orientation of putting the components in, and that's where really the Mako, this new robotic surgery, comes in. This is actually a professional golfer. She's a lady. You can see she's got osteoarthritis, the medial side of her knee. She's tried all the conservative measures and she's had a knee replacement. So typical questions from patients. When can I get back to golf, doc, and what can I do? Because I don't really know. They've Googled it. There's loads out there on Google. Some things you can't, some things on the website you can't go back to golf, some things 6 months. There's no real guidance out there for patients anyway. And we are quite vague, so I'm certainly very vague. But this is this is a publication from 1992. Bill Mallon was a professional golfer, late 70s, early 80s, before he ended up being an orthopaedic surgeon. And he's now the editor of Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery. So this was an audit that he did with the Hip Society. And you can see 5% of people said, don't return to golf. I don't think we say that anymore, but this is actually the last bit of evidence we've actually got of a survey of a group of orthopaedic surgeons. It's well out of date, and Paddy's going to put this right with a more recent survey. should we make swing changes, 12% or 10%, and the median time to golf, or back to golf, but it doesn't say what golf is, whether it's chip and putting or whether it's actually 18 holes, is around about 5 months. Very similar story for the knee. 10%, 7% wouldn't advise going back to golf. Now these percentages, my maths aren't brilliant, but these percentages don't really add up, do they? 92, 15, 4, 2, 2, that doesn't add up to 100, I don't think. But anyway, nonetheless, 15% we'll give them specific instructions when they go back to golf. What these instructions are, I don't know. Like most golfers, you change your swing every time you go out anyway, so I'm quite sure these specific instructions probably change quite a lot. This is a more recent paper from Papaloidis. They actually split it down into 3 phases. I think that's what probably most of us really do, even though we don't realise we do. We probably say you can go back to chipping and putting within 6 weeks or so, hit some iron shots, some driving range stuff at around about kind of 2-3 months. And you're there after that, just try your best around the golf course, few holes, build it up gradually, and then by 6 months you can go back to most things. But this was not a consensus, this was just them making it up. But I suppose this is what probably most of us do though. So, what changes do I have to make when I get back to my golf stock, or what's my chances of getting back to my golf? I thought this was already done until Paddy and I were working together last year and realised the evidence out there wasn't brilliant. We did this review with Roger, Joel, Andrew and the team at HSS. Systematic review, 23 studies. Shoulders at the top. There's quite a lot of data on shoulders, not much on knees and not much on hips. You think there'd be quite a lot. There's about 80% return for shoulders. You see here about a 70% return for knees. This was mainly due to that paper, Paddy, wasn't it? The Hopper paper from Glasgow. Yeah, that was that one, wasn't it? Yeah. Mainly due to that one, because it was quite low. And 2 hip papers, slightly better in 90%. Now, our papers that we're going to show now are the exact opposite to these two. So anyway. I kept this slide in because the mean time to golf here was around about 4 to 5 months. That's probably about right. But one thing that Paddy's study did show is that there's a positive prospective data. So that's led us to set up this study, which we tried to do. In fact, Roger coordinated this really last year, and we've probably let him down a little bit from our side in Edinburgh because we've had such a terrible time with trying to get this signed off. It's the golf study, golf after orthopedic surgery, a longitudinal follow-up study. And this is hopefully going to follow up patients after hip and knee replacements and shoulder replacement, both at HSS and NHS Lothian, prospectively looking at their return to golf and some golfing questionnaires as well that we'll go on and speak about later. What's my outcome going to be? How am I going to do, doctor? This is a study looking at total hip replacement. 300 patients, around about 44 were golfers. A retrospective study. 72%, 73% got back to golf. Those that got back to golf, 84% were satisfied. You're more likely to get back to golf if you were male sex, had a better preoperative quality of life and hip function. Not rocket science really. If you're better preoperatively, if you're physically fitter, you're probably more likely to get back to golf. It's not rocket science, is it? When we compared the hip-specific function, this is a thing called the Oxford score, they were significantly better post-operatively. And the EQ5D, I'm sure, slightly, there's no such thing as EQ5D VAS, but anyway, it should be the EQ VAS, but nonetheless, a slight misprint. You had a significantly better quality of life if you were a golfer and you returned as opposed to a non-golfer. Showing the benefits of golf. Very similar story for total knee replacement. Better knee-specific scores, the Oxford score there. The forgotten joint score was slightly higher in golfers. We're probably underpowered to show that for that score. And 43%, 90%, which is slightly different from that systematic review that we did, where it was only 70% return to golf, so slightly higher there. Of those that returned to golf, 31 of them, 65%, were still playing golf at 5 years. This is a physical function study that we've done just recently. It very much confirms the overall health benefits, EQ5 and EQ VAS, which was significantly better in golfers. But more importantly, golfers were more likely to have moderate or vigorous exercise, so health benefits of that post-operatively. Will my swing be affected by the arthroplasty afterwards? So i.e., do I need to go and have a robotic knee or something else or something different? Then golfers do look this up and they know that they might be at risk of dislocation of the hip or other things that's discussed online. So this is a study that Connor did a few years ago now, looking at the knee biomechanics, actually hip, knee and ankle biomechanics after total knee replacement. Total knee replacement, we remove the ACL. The ACL is a primary rotatory stabilizer of the knee, so you can probably imagine that the slide that's going to come next if you remove that ligament. So we looked at it at 6 different parts. Takeaway, mid backswing, top of the backswing, mid downswing, ball contact. I'm never that lucky for that bit, I kind of miss it. And mid follow through. This is the graphs that you get for left knee, right knee. That one is for flexion, extension, that one's ab and adduction. And there's no significant difference between those two, between the native knee, which is the control, and the prosthetic knee, the total knee replacement. However, in rotation, there was less external rotation of the total knee replacement relative to the native knee here on the backswing, and then on the follow-through, the contralateral knee, the lead knee, there was less internal rotation relative to the native. So there is a difference in rotation in the knee. There was also some difference in the hip as well, but we think that was due to the rotational differences in the knee. So can technology restore normal anatomy in this rotational problem? There's all sorts of things out there at the moment to try and improve outcomes of patients. Kinematic alignment's been talked about for years. This was a study we did about a decade ago now, looking at kinematic alignment, because everybody's knees is different. We all see everybody's knees. Some people are knock knees, some people are varus, and how we align the implant can be patient specific. This was a study that we did with Exeter, and it showed no significant difference. But there was probably a slight error in the surgeon as a implant and the knee replacement, as opposed to the concept itself of kinematic alignment. Now we've got all this technology, this shape matching stuff and patient specific jigs, which has kind of gone out of vogue a little bit now. Sensors that we put in to balance the joint, but these have kind of gone out of vogue a little bit as well, because we don't actually know what the normal pressures are. So what's the point of using it if we don't know what normal is? Navigation, but this is probably the thing that's really taking storm now, is the Mako, the robotic arm assisted knee replacement. This is Mark Blythe. He really is the pioneer of robotic surgery across the world, really. Even HSS was slightly behind Mark. I'm sorry, Joe. HSS have took off since, though. And he still continues to do some fantastic work on bicompartmental robotic surgery. And that's just over in Glasgow here. And this is the typical pictures that you get. This is for a total knee replacement. This is just how much bone's being resected, the alignment. We can put the thing in anywhere we want now with this robot. Take a CT scan beforehand, we plan it beforehand, and then it just carries it out exactly as planned. It's pretty simple. We've shown from our unit that we get better outcomes in some retrospective studies. We've got some prospective randomized trials, hopefully going to conclude shortly. And this thing's really accurate. It's plus or minus half a degree, which is obviously better than us, which most surgeons are plus or minus 3 degrees. This is a systematic review we published earlier this year. Which one's this one for? This is for total knee replacement. Far more accurate. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Using a robot, that's £500,000, it's bound to be. But more importantly, you are getting better patient-specific outcomes. So that's the WOMAC score, which is limb-specific, and the knee-specific, knee society scores. They're all better. This is something we published a bit earlier this year, and I've included this because this is the partial knee replacement, where you keep the ACL, so the rotational stability is probably going to be kept in the knee with an arthroplasty. It doesn't actually show better functional outcomes in these patients, probably because of the tools that were used, because they have a ceiling effect, so they weren't able to measure the benefits potentially of the robot. But certainly it's more accurate, which leads to the implant lasting longer. So if you put it in more precisely, as opposed to being off balance, the survivorship of the implant's longer, which is something we struggle with in manual knees. So the overall, it is more cost-effective procedure. And should there be a specific golf outcome measure? And there's not one. When we were setting up the study with HSS, we looked at a lot of the questionnaires out there, and it's difficult to find a questionnaire that really assesses golf. I mean, it's all well and good having an Oxford score of 34, but can you get back to doing 18 holes of golf, picking your ball out the hole, hitting a driver, and all that sort of stuff? So this is the Oxford score that we currently use. This is something we published a few years ago. Preoperatively, they're right in the middle here. It's quite nice, which is how this score was designed. It was a preoperative score, and then postoperatively, they're all up here. So it's a bit useless, really, because everybody just moves right at the top of the scale, and you can't really find out much more about this group here because you've come off the tape measure. At the top end of the tape measure, and you can't measure anymore. Same thing with EQ5D. This is an internationally recognized score. This is preoperatively. It often has this bimodal distribution. If you tick 3 on any of the boxes, you go straight into this box here. There's a 5L that's out now. That's slightly better than that. But you can see here, post-operatively, they still have this massive ceiling effect. Now this group here, Carl Geisinger, he's on this paper somewhere. He was a fellow with us years ago, worked with Paul Gaston, and this was the original forgotten joint score 20 that included golf, but it actually dropped off because it was only relevant to 20% of patients, so they dropped it off the final score and had a SF12. But it's actually a good score because most people score right in the middle here post-operatively, as opposed to right at the top there of the Oxford score. So the good score, but again, it's still not golf specific. So we've come up with, or Paddy's come up with this. I'll say we, it sounds better for me, doesn't it? We've come up with this a GAS score, Golf Arthroplasty and Awareness score, and it's a GAS 20 to begin with, and then hopefully we'll probably, once we've done the pilot of that, we'll maybe get that down to 10 or 8 questions that are relevant, that respond well, and maybe add in some extra questions relevant to the knee, hip, and shoulder. And this is our current pilot that we've got up and running. It's just a system that we get patients to log on to. They log on to this website, put the details in. Bob's your uncle. So we've covered hip and knee replacement, outcomes, some of the rehab, or when we should go back to golf, and we don't really know. But certainly these 3 phases that we've talked about is what most people would say. Functional return, golfers do better. Their overall health-related quality of life is better relative to non-golfers. And we've seen the health benefits as well, because they're more likely to get to moderate and vigorous exercise relative to non-golfers. Biomechanics of the knee are not quite restored after a total knee replacement, and maybe with the evolution of these new technologies of Mako and partial knee replacements, that may restore normal biomechanics, and that may help a lot of people, or those extra 20% of people that don't get back to golf. And maybe with the development of newer outcome tools as well, such as a GAS score, that may give us a bit more insight. I'd like to thank the team. I'd like to thank everybody in orthopedics and everybody here today for making today's Congress so good. And thanks for inviting me. I thought it was great, isn't it? I like that. Yeah.